Well, hello. Welcome back. This is the Sure Babe podcast. Thank you guys so much for being here. This is episode 26. I am super pumped to introduce you to my new favorite person, Michelle Knight. She is a branding and business coach for female entrepreneurs. She has a background in theater, and she has transformed her life to actually have the business and the life she wants, and now she is teaching other people how to do the same. She teaches you how to live a life of freedom, take action towards your dreams, and she supports women in their journey along the way. So she is a girl after my own heart, and today in this episode, we talk all about storytelling, specifically how to utilize storytelling in your business and your brand to grow your business, your platform, to have an authentic voice. I really do love this episode. I think everyone could get something out of it. So I'm really excited for you guys to get to meet Michelle Knight from brandmary.com. All right, without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Welcome to Sure Babe, a podcast by Chrissy Powers, mother, marriage and family therapist, photographer, and eternal optimist. Sure Babe is all about relationships, motherhood, career, and finding the life you want to live. Get ready, things are about to get real.
Hello, everybody. I am so excited today to have Michelle Knight on the podcast. Michelle is a branding expert / coach / woman after my own heart. I'm so excited that she reached out to me and that we connected online because she just has an inspiring story, and I feel like this episode is going to leave you with so many nuggets of wisdom that you can put into practice today in your life and your business. So, hello, Michelle. Welcome to Sure Babe.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to get to talk story today.
Yes, story specifically. I am so excited to talk story because I feel like that is becoming like a buzzword in business because people are learning the power of storytelling is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that when I started, which was really only 2.5 years ago, nobody was talking about it. It's crazy how quickly it can change.
Yeah. So before we dive into that, I just want you to introduce yourself. What do you do? Where are you from? Tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I currently live in St. Louis, Missouri, with my husband and my son. He'll be 3 next month. And what I do basically full time, air quotes, is I'm a branding and business mentor for female entrepreneurs. And I support female entrepreneurs in the launching, building, and really elevating stage of their business by tapping into their story to really show up authentically. And I haven't always done this. I know that's always the question, like, how long have you been doing this? So I actually have a background in PR and communications and worked for a nonprofit up until the point my son was born. And after he was born, I went through a really hard postpartum time for, stretching for like 3 months, although looking back, it was probably more like 8 months. And during that time, I explored what I was going to do now. What did my role as a mother look like? What did my role as a woman look like, a wife? And I discovered that I really wanted to kind of create my own business and really showcase my creativity in this way. And so I created my brand Mary, and now this is what I get to do 2.5 years later, and I love every second of it.
That is so awesome. So did you go to school? Did you just say that? Did you go to school?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually majored in PR and communications, but I was a late graduate because originally I went to school for musical theater.
Okay.
And,
yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so do you feel like how did you know that this is what you were meant to do? I get asked that a lot, and I have my own story, but I want to know how you decided that, okay, going from being like a Broadway, dreaming of being a Broadway star to then now I'm going to help women in business and I'm going to be a coach and a branding expert. How did you decide that?
It was definitely over the course of about, 7 years that this happened. But I think one of the biggest shifts for me was actually why I left school the first time was because my brother was actually diagnosed with cancer. And so I left school for musical theater and came home to be with my family. And during that time of his own diagnosis and his own treatment, and ultimately after he lost his battle, I went through kind of a discovery with myself of like, what do I actually want to do? Right? Like, I should be doing things that fill me up. I get one life. Not everyone gets this opportunity. And so I think that really set in motion this idea of me questioning everything. And so I moved from kind of job to job and this to this, because if I wasn't happy, I was gone.
Right.
And then that kind of led me to moving to Chicago with my now husband and just kind of thinking, what could I play with? I've been on stage. I love communicating in the form of singing and dancing and giving monologues. And that's when I really realized that the whole idea of communication is one of my favorite things, to be able to connect people in that way. And so with that major, I just started to explore how I could kind of create my own business around that.
And I love how you can take like the storytelling in your theater background with now, like, how do you do that online, or how do you do that in your business? And so many of us are doing, running businesses online, or, making money through social media. And I feel like that is a huge part, is being able to tell your story, whether it's your personal story or your brand's story. It's huge. And I think that's so cool that you can take your theater background and implement that in your new business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, too, it's like I use live video all the time for my business. And people always ask me, how do you do that? I'm like, well, I spent years on the stage, So it's like all of these small steps and transitions have really led me to where I am. And I think that was one of the key things that I did that first 6 months of starting my business, was looking at my own story and looking at all the things I've done to identify, what do I love doing? What can I create this business around? Because the last thing I wanted to do was leave a job that I actually did not hate. I just didn't like the commute or the time commitment, and create a business that I also didn't like. Like, that didn't make sense in my head. So I wanted to make sure that it really reflected my own story and the things that I loved.
Yeah. I love that you said that too. It totally reminds me of my first job that I've talked about before, which was like a great job, but it wasn't fulfilling to me. And I hated the commute, and I hated, being at a desk all day, and it didn't bring me the fulfillment. Now I had that nagging feeling of there's more for me out there. And so I want to know, for you and your clients who you work with, what does that first step look like?
Yeah, so I think you totally nailed it when you said you knew that more was possible. And so one of the first things that I really do with my clients at every single level is talk about the big picture. What do they ultimately see themselves doing 5-10 years from now? And how can we create a brand and a business that gets them there? And I think that's kind of the very first step, because one of the things that is really important in creating, especially a personal brand and a personal business, is you, right? Like, you are the center of this business. You're the one that has to show up. You're the one that has to make the content. You're the one that has to communicate. And so you have to be really grounded in what's the purpose behind this, and how has your story kind of led you to this?
Right. Oh, that is so refreshing to hear, because, I've talked about my e-course on here before, but that's why we put in mindfulness exercises, because we were like, people need to know who they are, and they need to be able to tap into that. And we live in a world that's we constantly have things bombarding or vying for our attention, and images bombarding us, that we sometimes lose track of what it is that we want and who we really are. So it sounds like you start from, with point A with someone to figure that out, what it is that they want and who they are.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the mistakes sometimes we make when it comes to a personal brand is we're looking outside of ourselves for all the answers. And this was my story to a T. I spent 6 months of like, this is what I'm going to do. And I started looking at other people that were doing that. And I started thinking about all the people I wanted to attract. And then what happened was I didn't really know how to communicate anything because I was just looking outside myself. So I think one of the most important pieces is to look inward first, set up a really strong foundation of who you are, what's led you here, why are you doing what you're doing, so that you can start communicating that. And then the second phase is, okay, now that I know this, who do I want to bring into this world? Who do I want to serve? And what do I need to know about them?
Oh, I love that. Who do I want to serve? I've told people that too with like social media, because people oftentimes want to grow a following. And I say, well, you have to produce content that's going to serve someone. And before you post, ask yourself, who does this serve or how does it serve them? That's so cool.
I love that. I do something very similar, and I tell my clients the same thing of like, ask yourself, like, how does this serve my audience? And if you can't answer that question, then don't post it.
Don't post it. Yeah, like there's so many pictures I could post of my kids that I'm like, yeah, like I want to post it, but I'm like, does it really serve them every day to see a picture of my child? Probably not, but yeah, no, we really are like so much alike. We need to hang out in person.
I know. I love it.
I just love what you're doing to help women. So then let's go into say like, okay, you find out what your passion is. Like, I want to do, I want to go back and become, a hairstylist or something, or you find like, okay, I need to go back to school and become a therapist, or I need to, be able to promote my art or my photography business better. Then how does someone go into branding that? Like, let's talk about that since you have so much experience with helping people brand themselves. What's the first step in branding?
Yeah. So, my definition of branding, and again, this goes with the story. I think the movement is changing, but what we used to think about branding in terms of like what it looks like is just not true anymore. It's important, but it's not the first step. And when you do that first, that's when you have to rebrand in 2 months because you're like, oh, this isn't right. So I think it just goes back to kind of what we've been chatting about. There's 3 phases that I believe are the foundation of a really strong money-making brand. And number 1 is you, right? Who you are, why you do what you do, and what you ultimately bring to the table. Number 2 is who do you want to bring in? So really understanding your audience. And I'm a big advocate for market research. I really believe in having those conversations with people and asking them the questions. What are you struggling with? What do you want, right? Because this is going to help you create a brand that speaks directly to them. And that is the most important piece of communication. And then number 3 is the actual communication. How can you communicate what you do, your story, and what you offer to your audience in a way that has them saying, I need that right now, or I'm ready to take action? Because that is what you need, especially with the world of social media and all the information that's floating around. We really have to resonate clearly with our audience. And so once you have a very clear idea of the 3 phases, then you can play with the aesthetics.
Okay.
And one of the things that I teach is emotional branding. And it's this idea that we want people to feel something when they see our brand or hear our brand or, come in contact with our brand, because people resonate with feeling.
Yeah.
Above all else. And that's why story works so well, because story makes us feel something and it's memorable. And so when we can pull that into our aesthetics, when we can choose colors that are based on an emotion, when we choose fonts that are based on an emotion, right? Brand photography, like we were talking about before, that is when you create websites that people stay on and explore. And that's when you create Instagram feeds that people can't get enough of.
Right. Because of the feeling that they're getting from it. I like that. So let's go into story. Let's talk about that a little bit more, because it is becoming such a buzzword now of how to become a good storyteller. And I feel like even just 2 years ago, it wasn't such a big deal on social media and, with businesses. It was just kind of like you post a picture of your product or whatever. But now it's like you need to be careful and really have a strategy for the story that you're telling. I like to think of like mine in a way of like, okay, I can't talk about everything because I'm quite an eclectic person, but I want to talk about like at least 5 things consistently that are me. But that's just me. So I want to know from you, teach me your ways. How can someone become a better storyteller?
So I think, again, number one is how does it benefit somebody? Because it's really easy to sometimes think of story as like, I'm just going to share with you my diary, I'm just going to share with you my thoughts. But if it's not providing something to someone, if it's not of service to someone, then it's not going to do anything for your brand and your business. And, that's ultimately what we want to do. We want people to really resonate with that. And I think when it comes down to with storytelling is the reason we tell stories is to be memorable and to build trust. And so that's what we really need to focus on when we're writing these content, when we're writing an email, we're writing a blog post, when we're making a video. But I think you totally nailed it when you said that we have multiple layers, like I like to use the reference from Shrek where he talked about like being an onion, right? Yeah. And there's like, I feel like if you have kids, right?
Oh, yeah.
You have like all of these layers. Well, we as storytellers have layers, and our audience has layers too. They're not just coming to you for one thing. Maybe that's how they found you, but what's going to get them to stay is connecting with them on all of these different pieces, all these different layers. And so actually one of the things I teach, and I almost am like, were you on this webinar, is the idea of 5 brand containers. So you create these 5 categories or containers based on your story that you love talking about, that you can rotate through, that builds a connection with your audience, and only one of them can actually be your business.
Oh, I like that. So that it's like, it's a good balance. Would you say that? Like,
oh, yeah. It creates that balance, and so that your audience doesn't feel like they're being pitched to all the time. But then it also builds that trust so that what if someone finds you but isn't necessarily at that stage of your clients right now? If you don't have another reason for them to stay engaged, they're going to peace out. And then in 6 months, they probably forgot about you. Where if we can keep them because, let's say someone finds me because they've love traveling or something. And so if they continue to follow me because of my travels, and then in 6 months they decide to leave their job, they're probably going to come to me to help them do that because we've built this connection, we've built this trust.
That's a really great point. I love that. Yeah, people are coming back to you for more than just that one thing that they started following you for, or like, yeah, that makes so much sense. Because you are building that trust. I said that too in the e-course that I created, that when people are buying from you or using your audience, they're buying into the trust that you've built with your audience. And that is like something really precious because it's so hard to, bridge that gap in the beginning. But I feel like once you get a solid customer or client or follower, it's like, then you know that they are your follower for life, or they're following you for life because you've been authentic and real. And I would say, I know that is an overused word these days, but how does authenticity play into that storytelling?
Yeah, so I think authenticity, and it's so overused, but it's my favorite word still, and I refuse to let it go. So I think authenticity plays a role because it just piggybacks off the whole idea of trust. And, you totally said it. There's actually a quote from Zig Ziglar that says, if someone likes you, they'll listen. And if they trust you, they'll do business with you. Yeah. And so it's all about the trust. And so when you can show up authentically, because you can totally share stories and only highlight the good stuff. But if you are an authentic storyteller and you are willing to share the good stuff, the not so good stuff, that relate to your audience's struggles, that's where the trust comes in. Because if I'm constantly telling you that my life is peachy keen and I have a toddler and you don't believe me, right? I'm not showing you what it's actually like to be a working mother and talk about those things, you're not going to trust me. as much. So I think that's where the authenticity comes in, is your willingness to be vulnerable and to show those different pieces. Again, always asking yourself, how does this benefit my audience? Right. That's where the trust really, really comes into play, and it happens quicker. And I think that is really important, because when we're building a business, we obviously want to get to profitability fast, right? We want this to sustain our lives and our dreams and our ultimate goals. And so what things can you put into place that can lead you there? And I think one of the biggest pieces is authentically showing up and focusing on building relationships.
I love that. What would you say to someone that's like, but I have such a hard time opening up, or I'm scared, or how much is too much to share?
Yeah. Such a good question, and one I get all the time. Yeah. So I think, and I just wrapped up a challenge, and we were talking about this very thing. And I think when you go through a process of first thinking about what you want to share, and then thinking about what your audience needs to hear, it's way different than if you just go into like, oh, this is what my audience wants. And then we almost change our stories or change our ideas of like what we're worthy to share based on our audience. So I think you have to start with you first and get really clear on what's your own journey and what has kind of led you to where you are. And then I like my clients to create a statement of why they need to share their story, because that's where all the confidence comes from. Mm-hmm. It comes from you feeling really grounded in the purpose behind the story. And when you can do that, it's like everything shifts for you. And then you add on that other layer of your audience. And when you become really clear on your audience and what they need to hear from you, suddenly it's like, well, of course I have to show up, because you're talking to that one person now. You're not trying to appeal to everyone. And I think that's where the fears come in, and the feeling like our story isn't significant. It's because we haven't taken the time to identify who actually needs to hear it.
Wow, that's like a light bulb moment for me. I haven't really thought about that. I know I fall back on my why, and I was going to ask you, how does that play into your why? And do you tell people to write down their reason for, not just a mission statement for the business, but what is your reason for sharing or opening up or producing something?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I use a different word, and I'll share with you guys why. Because when I first started my business, and everyone, the first module of every course was like, what's your why? Because Simon Sinek is on to something here. He's not a fool. So when I used to get those questions, I would say, oh, I want to leave my 9 to 5. I want this business to take off because I want to leave my job, because I want to be home with my son, because I want to travel. And that was great. That got me to about the year mark. And then suddenly my business was still not where I wanted it to be. I got hit with a huge tax bill I wasn't expecting. And I thought about throwing in the towel. And my why suddenly was well, I could have all those things if I bartend too, right? So I had to really dig deeper into my purpose of what's the entire purpose behind this business and what's going to keep me going. And that's when I realized that the purpose of what I was doing was to empower more women to share their story, and to do that through entrepreneurship. And when I became really grounded in that really became the driving force for me. So my language, the word purpose, really resonates with me more than maybe the why. I always the why for me is the surface stuff that I could get with any type of job. But it's really what's the legacy? What do I want to ultimately leave behind?
Oh, that's so good. What's the legacy? I love that. And purpose, yeah, just immediately when you said that word, I was like, oh, yeah, that is definitely more weighty than why, because why? Yeah, why? Because I want to make money. I want to do it at home. But that's
exactly
not enough to keep you going when you get a bad response or critic or review from someone. It's you have to have a purpose to keep doing that. Okay, I'm totally going to use that.
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so you are a mom. Let's talk a little bit about motherhood and finding yourself in it, because I feel like you might be a lot like me in that I feel like a lot of women, when they have children, kind of lose themselves a little bit in motherhood, unless they have something else that reminds them of like who they are as a person apart from motherhood. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping women to, help them in their entrepreneurship or in their business somehow, or just even if it's not a business, but something that just grounds you as a person apart from your children, because we give to them so much that oftentimes you can feel depleted. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, totally. I agree. And I think it's definitely not talked about a lot. And for me, and this was, I guess, almost 3 years ago, no one told me about this. Like, I had no idea how I was going to change after giving birth. And it was like immediate. I immediately was just like, could not recognize myself, even looking in the mirror, and not everyone goes through extreme levels of postpartum, but I think, like you said, a lot of women after having their children, they're suddenly like, wait, everything that I knew to be true has now shifted. Yep. And now I have to not only figure out how to be a mom, but now how do I figure out how to be this new person?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so for me, my son's birth was like my rebirth. I started to really question who I was and how I was showing up. And it was through the hard time and through the asking myself and building my own business, right? Taking these small little steps that I started to really become the person that I kind of always imagined for myself. But it was a process. And I think sometimes it's like, being a mom is awesome, but it is not what defines me. And I don't know if you can relate to that as well, but that's like, I was raised in a different way. Like, I think our generation before us was like, you're a mom, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, I can be a better mother when I'm a better woman. Like, when my creativity is explored, when I'm healthy, right? When I have a job that I love, like, I can show up for my son even more in that way. And I think that that's the whole point behind it is taking the time, whether you're going through the postpartum or it's a year later or 3 years later, and you're like, wait a second, there's something missing here, to actually explore that. And maybe it means starting your own business, but maybe it just means switching jobs, or maybe it means leaving your job altogether, or picking up yoga. I don't know. It's different for everyone, but I think it's just about us giving ourselves permission to be more and to do more.
I love that. Okay, so I shied away from talking about those kinds of things, like, a little bit, because I never wanted anyone to feel marginalized, like, well, I'm just a mom at home, and even that phrase, just a mom, I'm like, gosh, just a mom is everything. Everything. You are a chauffeur, you're a cook, you're a nurse, you're a therapist. Like, it is an all-encompassing job. So I would never want to make anyone feel like they have to do more. But then I found this, like, I guess the woman I'm talking to is the woman that is like, I am a mom and I absolutely love it, but I also miss being the artist. I also miss, working at the shop, or I also, and I wanted to speak to that woman too, how to find that passion again and that voice. And then if they wanted to start their own business, or do their own thing, to give them the tools to do that well. So I love that you have on your site, you have this awesome quote: freedom for me is not having to apologize for wanting more out of life. I love that, because I feel like I can remember the moment where I realized that for me was that I don't have to apologize for being who I am, and also wanting more than just being a mom. Like, I wanted more than, just being a mom. And I had a job before children. So it was like, okay, how do I just turn that off and then just say, this is my new job? And then I feel like we live in a day and age where it's never been easier to have a career, and be a mother at the same time. It's still challenging, and we're still like in that emerging process of like, equal rights for women and equal pay and everything. But that's why I feel like this is so needed to talk. We need to talk about these things more. So what are your thoughts on that freedom, and then not apologizing for wanting more?
Yeah, I think it's like, and I think you totally like nailed it again. I feel like we could just talk. We just have to hang out, right? Like get coffee or wine or something. I think it's about, again, giving ourselves permission to want that. I think we all want it. Like we all have those moments. I can safely say I've worked with so many moms. I attract a lot of moms to my business. I've had conversations with so many moms that it's not that there's not a want there or a desire. It's that we haven't given ourselves permission to explore that, or we don't think it's possible.
Wow.
And I think that's such an important part, just not just in motherhood, but in any part of life, that, you know, I could have easily, just using my own story as an example, I could have easily said, no, I got a job I like, and now, you know, I'm a mom, and like, it doesn't make sense for me to start a business right now. I mean, I started my business when my son was a month old on maternity leave. There were a lot of obstacles in my way.
Oh, but, totally.
You know?
I get it.
I listened to that voice inside, that kind of fire inside, and I knew that I owed myself at least exploring it and seeing what was possible. And I think it just goes down to self-worth.
Yeah,
and
it really does.
You know, and knowing that you are worthy of having a job that you like and a career that you like. Like, you know, like it pains me when I hear people who are like, oh, well, this is just life. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, you get to create, you know, I often say you get to write your own ending. Like, you have that power. But I think the first stage is tapping into like why you really want it, the purpose behind it, and then knowing that you as a human are worthy of just that. But you have to make that decision, and sometimes it's hard, and sometimes people are going to look at you like you're insane, but you have this one freaking life, like one life.
Yeah.
Why not live it, and why not show our children that that's possible for them as well?
You took the words right out of my mouth. I want to talk about seasons a little bit too, in that, because I feel like being a mom and then starting your passion, or your, you know, going after what you want, aside from motherhood, if you look at it as like seasonal, then it's like a little less scary. If you're like, you know, I'm just going to try it, and if I have to like back off and take a season of rest, I can do that. And I think for anybody, that's a good thing to like think about. Like if, for instance, like you said, you started your business like, you know, a month after you had a baby. And I was thinking, I did one of the biggest things in my career by like creating an e-course and launching it. I created it while I was pregnant, filmed it when I was 36 weeks pregnant, and then released it like while I had a 2-month-old. And I was like, this is insane. But also at the same time, I'm so happy that I live in a world where I can do that, and I'm getting fulfilled on that level of, you know, my character and like my personality is like, that's who I am. Like, I just want to keep producing things that help other people and get fed also by doing that. But I also realize, okay, now I'm in a season of where I need to like kind of slow down a little bit and maybe give to myself a little bit more instead of putting stuff out there. And I feel like that it takes away a little bit of the pressure to, I have to do this and I have to run full force to the finish line. I don't think you have to have it all figured out right away.
No, absolutely not. I don't think we ever do, right? Like we want to. That sounds really cool to have it all figured out, but guess what? It's like not possible.
It's not.
Yeah, and I think the idea of like seasons as a mother and as an entrepreneur, like you were talking about both, are so true. And we hear the word balance a lot, but I like the word harmony, which I can't take credit for. Someone posted on Instagram and I took it. But I love the idea of harmony, because harmony has this kind of like ebb and flow to it, where you know that sometimes you have to give more in this arena and less in this, and then, you know, you can kind of equal itself back out. So like, there are times in my business where I have to give a lot to my business, right? And then there are times when I literally do hardly anything in my business, and I get to just like, I traveled for the whole entire month of September to Paris and Iceland, and I got to do that, and everything was just kind of on automate. And so you have to have that understanding that that's life, right? There's a reason that we have seasons of like spring and fall and winter. Like we're supposed to be like all out there and then step back every once in a while and give more love to this area and more love to this area at different times. And I think it just goes back to being like giving yourself permission and being compassionate with yourself to do just that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite inspirational speakers, Rob Bell, talks about that. I think he has a podcast episode on it of like, you don't need permission to do the thing that you want to do. Like, give it to yourself, basically. And that was just awesome for me to hear at that time in my life, because I was always looking for approval from other people. Like, even just like family. I was like, what do they say about it? Oh, if a friend was like, didn't really want to talk about what I do, then it would kind of hurt me. Or like, I would make up stories in my head that, oh, they don't approve of what I do, or they don't understand it. And then I finally got to this place where I was like, I don't need their permission / approval. I don't need it. Oh, so yeah.
And I think it's definitely hard, like you said, like you went through that. I go through it from time to time too, and I know so many of like the women in my community do as well. But as humans, we're always seeking permission.
Yeah.
Like all the time. Even if we already know the answer, like I can't tell you how many times I've known what I should be doing, and I still ask my husband, and then he tells me, and I'm like, okay, I don't know why I asked you. You know what I mean? Like I already knew that, but we just we need someone to tell us that that's okay. And it's important to have those people in your life that you do trust, that can kind of give you that nudge when it's like a fear-based type of thing.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we really just have to trust ourselves. And we really just have to give ourselves permission to do the things that we want to do. That's the hurdle. That's the first step. And once you get over that, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, my possibilities are endless.
Yeah, it really is true. And I like that you mentioned that it overall comes down to knowing your worth, and that I am worth doing this, or I'm worth this risk, or I am, worth giving myself permission to do this because I'm meant to be doing this, or, or because, hey, what's the other alternative? In therapy, oftentimes I would ask people, okay, what is the alternative if you don't try this this tool, or if you don't try, I worked with girls with eating disorders in the past, and it was like, okay, if you don't try this next step that we're working on, or to meet this goal, like what would be the alternative? And then it was always like, well, this, and this, which was always usually bad. And so it was like, yeah, like it's worth, you're stuck in the place you're at right now. And do you like being here? No, probably not. So it was like, okay, then let's take that next step. Let's take the risk. Let's try this new thing. And I guarantee you'll be happier for it. Like even if you fail, even if you mess up, you're going to learn from it. That's what I always say, is I learn from, like, I fail forward.
Yeah, totally. I think it's only a failure if you stop.
Exactly. Yeah, I do too. Yeah, I mean, and stopping would just be like closing up shop and forgetting about it, packing it away. But we talk about in the e-course a little bit about pivoting. Like it's okay to like pivot your career and realize, oh, maybe I want to go this direction, but it's not stopping. It's just changing course a little bit. So what do you think about pivoting? And like, maybe people already are in their career, but they're like wanting to like rebrand or revamp things so that it's more true to who they are.
I love a good pivot. Yeah, I always think of like Ross from Friends every time I say that word. But I really I think the biggest thing, and I needed permission about this not too long ago, which is really interesting, is that we are meant to evolve. We as humans are meant to evolve. Our brands and our businesses are also meant to evolve with us. And so pivots, rebrands, changes like that are only making our business stronger and making us more in alignment with like the person that we are now. Like the business that I had 2 years ago is not the same as the business that I have now. And I've made small tweaks along the way. No one probably even noticed except for me.
Right.
So I think the biggest thing, and what I tell people, is to like start integrating it slowly. So start making these changes, feel really good about that, snowball into something else, move into something else, rather than maybe just like cutting the cord and just like starting over from scratch. Like use the momentum you've already created, whether that is you're an entrepreneur and it's your brand, or even maybe you work in corporate. Like use the momentum you've already created and start making these small pivots and transitions to what's now in alignment with who you are.
I like that. So would you say you're against like maybe a major brand rehaul and then like announcing like, okay, like check our new brand out? Or would you just make changes slowly over time?
It's not that I'm against like a new website or something like that. I think those are really cool, and like getting the momentum. But I think like starting to explain why you're doing it or what's leading you in this direction. I mean, that's what's of service to your audience, anyways. Like, again, it's just about building trust, inviting them into the process rather than maybe just like keeping it behind closed doors and then just being like, we're starting over. People are going to be like, what? Like, I didn't even know something was going on, and I've followed entrepreneurs before who suddenly like shared that they've like for years and years we're just like talking about authenticity, and then suddenly they said, oh, I filed bankruptcy, and it's like nobody knew that. And it's not that we have to share all of our dirty laundry, but they lost a lot of followers because they didn't feel invited in, And so I think if you're wanting to rebrand, build excitement about it, number one, by talking about it.
Yeah.
Like, why not invite your audience in on that process? And then, kind of like give hints or drop hints slowly or whatever. So it's not like a complete like 360.
I like that so much because it goes back to the storytelling. You're still telling people your story, and rebranding or changing direction, pivoting, whatever you want to call it, is part of that story. So it's important to share that. I think you're so right. Yeah. How would you say it's important to make those changes? Like if things are going great, but you realize like, okay, things have been kind of like looking the same for a few years. Like, is it important to change things up? And how often would you do that?
Yeah, so I don't think it's necessary if it still feels in alignment with who you are and who you want to attract, right? Like, I think that's number one. Like, don't feel like just because someone else does it every 90 days, you have to too. Or that, like, it's been the same for 2 years. If it's working and it still feels good to you, why put energy towards that? But if it doesn't feel good to you, if things don't feel in alignment, then I would sit down and look like at your current brand and make a list of like what isn't in alignment with my new message, what doesn't light me up anymore, what do I want to maybe show more of, and like make a list and then start making those changes. Again, one of the last things I want anyone to do with the branding process is allow the branding process to take away from profitability. And so sometimes what we can do is we're like, I need to update my website. And so we spend 30 days updating our website and not selling anything. And then suddenly we hate branding because it like made us lose money. But it was just the decision. So if you can make this list and slowly start doing these things and changing it, and then maybe like, close up shop for like a week and just like flip some little switches, and then suddenly it's a new website. That's what I always encourage my audience to do. But ultimately, you only need to make changes if it doesn't feel in alignment with your story and the message of your brand.
Awesome. Okay, so being a branding expert yourself, do you find like yourself noticing like people that are doing it really well online? Like, is it easy for you to spot it out and you're like, that person's got it down?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like too that like even before I see their follower count or like anything like that or comments, I can like notice, especially on like Instagram or websites, and then suddenly you notice, oh, they have a giant following. Of course they do, because they're using story, they're connecting with their audience, and people are really resonating with that.
Are there any other things that you see that those people are doing that we haven't talked about yet? Like that we can maybe give some pieces of wisdom to people that are like, okay, yeah, I do want to like hone in on my Instagram, or I do want to have a better cohesive. I just said the word cohesive, which was one of my tips, but I
was going to say,
yeah, cohesiveness. But what do you notice that those people are doing well?
Honestly, number one is the storytelling. Anyone that you see that has a giant following on Instagram or is making, 6-7 figures in their business, they are doing a beautiful job of telling their story in a way that resonates with their audience. And they do it through the photos, and they do it through the copy on their website, and they do it through the captions, and they do it through their live videos. They just do it everywhere.
I was going to say, yeah, across the board, everywhere.
Across the board to build trust. And they're using all of the different amazing platforms that are available to us at no cost. So I think that's number one. And then I think you totally hit it with the cohesiveness, the consistency, is they're not showing up for like 3 days and then peacing out for 2 days. They're showing up consistently for their audience. Again, it just goes to trust, right? Like you trust people who are showing up and you kind of know where they're showing up and when they're showing up and the type of value that you can get from them. And so I think that the brands that are doing it really, really well, not only are consistently showing up, but their messaging is consistent across all platforms. So if I find them on Facebook, it's going to have the same look and feel and message as if I stumbled upon their website, or if I found them on Pinterest or Instagram. And I think, again, that's just the whole trust thing. So consistency, storytelling, the cohesiveness, again, across all platforms. And I want to say this, visually appealing, but I want you to also know that it's different for everyone, right? Like, take the time, once you realize your story and your emotions and all the things we've talked about today, to create images and videos that reflect that, because ultimately that's what pulls people in right away. If I'm scrolling through Instagram, I stop and read a caption because of the photo.
Yeah.
If I'm scrolling through Facebook, I stop and, read a video or read, a post there because of the photo, or watch a video because of something that I saw. That's what pulls people in. And so I think it's such an important piece of the branding process, and those doing it really well, but you have to have the foundations in place first in order for that to make sense.
Yeah, definitely. So we've talked a lot about Instagram, and I think that's a given. People know, like, if you have a business, Instagram is one of the best places to hang out on to promote it.
Absolutely.
Is there a platform or tool that you feel like people aren't utilizing as well as they should?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think in terms of platforms, it's Pinterest.
Yeah.
I feel like Pinterest is just not, it's getting there, but it's changing all the time. I think Pinterest went through this like surge of business. So like all of our businesses just talked about business. And now it's kind of going back to the lifestyle arena again. Again, this is why it's important to show different facets, to be a human, to talk about like your morning routine and the 5 tips for a great brand. And producing all of those resources in that way. So I think Pinterest is definitely rocking it. But then I also think not so much a platform, but a way is through video. I just think, Instagram, IGTV, right? Or Insta stories, live video, watch shows on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn is getting video. It'll be only a matter of time before Pinterest has more video, you know? I think that's just the direction everything is going. And that's a really beautiful way for us to also share our story.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Video is definitely where it's at, which is scary for some people that don't like to be on video. But, I think you just have to get practice and comfortable being in front of the camera and looking at yourself while you're talking to the camera, and then going back to those foundations, like you said, of knowing who you are, knowing your worth, and then that gives you kind of more of the courage to just put yourself out there more.
Totally. And I think it's a process. So don't feel like your very first video is going to look like someone's 100th video, right? I always say don't compare your chapter 1 to someone's chapter 10. It's not going to be the same. My old videos were crap.
Yeah.
They were so bad. And I just watched them the other day because someone had made a comment about building my business with my son. So I went back to watch these videos and I was like, why did people listen to me? But, I think it's just like we all have to start somewhere. And I would also say that if you do have this fear around video, to give you just like a little tip, Insta Stories is a great place to start because you have 15 seconds to share a video. It does not have to be your face, and you can start experimenting with kind of welcoming people into your world and using video in like smaller little chunks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And it's like, I just listened to Jenna Kutcher say this yesterday. She said, pretend like you're talking to one person and don't keep taking takes. Like, you know, she said she used to do several takes to do one story, and now she's like, you know what? And I'm just like, yeah, I'd send that to my sister, and then she'll post it. And I was like, I like that. Just imagining that you're talking to one person and then it's your friend and you're not really going to care that much about it being perfect.
Absolutely. I love Jenna.
Yeah.
She's one of those people doing branding amazing, right? But
Exactly.
I do the same thing with videos that I record for my courses. I pretend like I'm live. I just give it one take. That's all I get.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think in the past, like, I know I had to break that in me where it was like, I don't have several days to review an article I've written or like a blog post like it's an article, you know? So same thing. You don't have forever to always look over captions and videos and all these things. It's like, you know, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect to post it.
Mm-mm. Yeah, done is better than perfect.
Done is better than perfect. Yep. And also, yeah, hopefully that gives any of you guys listening some courage that you just have to post it. You don't have to have it be perfect, because I know I've caught myself several times in the past, like, oops, got to go back and change that typo. But you know what? Everybody does it. So awesome. Is there anything else you would want to share with our listeners, like that, you know, you feel like is important?
Yeah, I think we covered a lot, which I love. I think the biggest piece of the puzzle is just that, you know, you are worthy of exploring whatever that looks like for you. If that means starting your own business, if it means writing your own book, if it means traveling the world. Like, I just really believe that we have all these amazing abilities, and it's just our job to say, yeah, I want that, and to go after it. And in relation to that, in building a business, I think it's like, I want my business to be at this level, or I want to share this story, or I want to launch this program, and you can do that, right? It's just like really about listening to ourselves and giving ourselves permission, and then taking the action to kind of bring it to life.
Yeah. Oh, real quick, I do want to ask you, because I'm a, you know, big person on roadblocks. Like, I realize people have roadblocks, and I can give them as much of this information and tips as possible, but they won't do it unless they can overcome the roadblock that they have. How have you worked with your clients to help them overcome their roadblocks?
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. And my own. I've had a lot of those. I think, and it's funny, we were talking about done is better than perfect, because perfectionism is one of mine. It's a long-standing roadblock of mine. But I think that the first key is to identify the roadblock, right?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes we don't recognize that we even have it. We're just like, oh, this doesn't work. Or we have this story that we've been telling ourselves over and over again. So it's about pinpointing and kind of being aware of what that roadblock is. And then giving yourself time to correct the roadblock, right? We're not going to plow through it. That's not going to fix the problem. It's about understanding it and then figuring out why that happens. Maybe it's a trigger for you. Maybe it's a past story. Maybe it's something that's happened in a previous chapter of your life. Why is that happening, and how can you start to heal that? So I'm a really big fan of therapy. You know, therapy, inner work, mindset work. I just think it's really important, especially as an entrepreneur. So taking the time to actually work through that roadblock, because you're going to be a better entrepreneur. You're going to be a better mentor. You're going to be a better business owner, CEO, mother, if you actually take time to work through that so it doesn't keep affecting you. And it's not that it's about eliminating the roadblock. I think that's kind of this idea that, like, we're going to do it one time and it's going to be gone forever.
Yeah.
It's about the awareness, so that when it comes up again, we can be like, okay, not today. Or like, I know exactly what I need to do to get through that. And now I can continue kind of taking action and living my life.
You're so right. I just talked to my own therapist yesterday about that. And I said, I thought this was done. I thought I had worked through this. And she said, it's a continual thing. And you need to realize, like, how you dealt with it in the past and then deal with it again. And it's just going to keep coming up. But also, I feel like I'm glad you mentioned, like, why, you know, figure out why you have that roadblock, where it comes from in your life, whether from childhood or, you know, any other phase in your life. what is the trigger? What happened around that? And I in my own life realized, like, okay, this roadblock keeps coming back up when I don't pay enough attention to my like emotional self, and I'm not giving to myself enough. And then this happens. And then I know how to deal with it now, but it's like, oh, that's why it keeps coming back. So I'm glad we talked about that, because you just gave everybody so much wisdom and advice, I feel like, that they can implement into their lives right away and their businesses. But we want you to overcome those roadblocks first, because if we don't help you tackle that, then you might not be able to use all of this knowledge and wisdom that you just gave everybody. So thank you so much, Michelle, for all of that. It was so good to talk to you. Where can people find you? What do you have for them? I know you said you had a freebie. So yeah.
So I'm on all the platforms, right? I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Brand Mary Coaching, and my website is brandmerry.com, BrandMerry. I have tons of resources, but the one freebie I think you guys would absolutely love is my brand story quiz, and it's a quiz that you get to go through to identify which of the core 5 stories is actually reflected in your own story, and then I give you some really cool marketing strategies and how to communicate that with your audience. So it's a fun quiz, number one, and you'll walk away with some really cool marketing tips. So you can actually get that on my website or just brandmerry.com/quiz.
That is awesome. I'm going to go do that right now.
It's fun.
I know. It's always fun learning more about yourself. So, yes. Okay. Well, thank you so, so much for being here. I hope you guys got a ton out of that. I know I did. So thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Whew, nuggets of wisdom, I tell you. Michelle knows her stuff about branding. Hopefully that was super informative and helpful for you guys, because it definitely was for me. I just want to take this time to say thank you so much for listening to Sure Babe and sharing about it. I love seeing where you're listening and what episode you're listening to. So hashtag Sure Babe Podcast on social media and tag me at Christy J. Powers so I can see it and then share as well on my Instagram. And if you wanted to consider being a Patreon, there is a link in the description of this episode, and we appreciate that so much, as well as rating and reviewing this podcast. If you are liking what you're hearing, please consider rating and reviewing it on iTunes so more people can find Sure Babe. Thank you guys again so much, and have a wonderful week.